dream take flight. AI stands ready, a guiding light. With whispers of wisdom, it sparks the mind. Unveiling ideas, both rare and refined. It sits through the chaos, like patterns anew. Crafting rich thoughts and characters too. The dialogue's rhythm, the setting so grand. AI lends a hand, like a trusted friend. So
Well, welcome everybody to today's webinar, AI and Editorial, Available Tools, Remarkable Results. We're thrilled to have you with us as we dive into the tools that AI can offer for your editorial workflows and their impressive outcomes. This webinar series grew from discussions in BISG's AI working group, which remains open to participants, both members and non-members. So I encourage you to sign up and get involved if this is important to your work. Now, I'm delighted to introduce Thad McIlroy, our expert speaker today and the mastermind behind the series. Thad, thank you so much for putting this together for us.
Thanks very much, Brooke. Good to be back, as it were, from up to number 2 in the series. Oops, we get to there. There we go, our series. So many of you were with us last month where we had the first part of this 4-part series, the landscape for content licensing for AI. Today, we've got part 2, AI and editorial. Next month, we've got AI workflows for authors and publishers. And then in December, our Christmas special will be on AI and authorship, a panel of authors whose work has been impacted by AI. The replay and slides from today's presentation will be available to all registrants by the end of next week. And the previous events are also available to registrants. So if you've registered for the whole series, you can see the previous events. And likewise, we've got the first series is available for everyone. It's on YouTube. There's the URL down below. We had in May, can AI be detected in writing? And in June, can AI be useful in book translation? Those programs both went very well, so I would recommend taking a look at those. Today, we've got AI and editorial, available tools, and some remarkable results. And Peter Brantley is going to be the host today. Aaron Survey will be with us. So I want to turn it over to Peter.
Hi, everyone. I think host in name only because hat tip to Thad for putting us all together. So very happy to be here with you. So the editorial aspect of integration of AI services is a really critical one for publishing. And I think in some ways that it encapsulates a lot of the issues that AI brings into our industry and the kinds of work that we do. For a lot of us, I think we're really grappling with whether or not AI's integration into our workflow is a whole new definition of the kind of work that we do, or is it just another tool? You know, are we all set to go off to the hardware store and buy a new hammer, or is this something really different? Is this something that makes us rethink how we orient ourselves to the work that we're doing, and how we sort of reface the how we work with our authors, how we work with our marketing communications team, how we work with our production group. And I think it's that nexus that this kind of conversation can help us bring to the fore. So, you know, many of us have worked with grammar checking tool sets. Many of us have seen how those have integrated AIs. You know, we've perhaps looked at how large language models have been able to support grammar checking and the facilitation of optimal language around certain kinds of texts. But I think many of us suspect there's more to the story than just that. I think we're all trying to understand how AI tools might wind up being deeply embedded in the work that we're doing and end up facilitating the kind of editorial determinations that we've sort of assumed were kind of pipelined through the editorial process. So, you know, we're lucky today to have Aaron Survey with us. Aaron will show us some of the new tools that are available for us in the world of AI. But I want us all to keep in mind through the hour as we contemplate what we're seeing here, what we're trying to understand here, how the larger world of editorial work might end up changing. So back to you, Thad.
Great. Thanks very much, Peter. Just a little bit of background on what brings me to a session like this. I've been very focused on digitization and automation publishing throughout my career. I've been studying AI for quite a long time, and of course, really dive deep into it in the last couple of years. I cover AI for Publishers Weekly, and I've just written a book that came out this summer on the AI revolution in book publishing. And also, people sometimes assume, that my background is only technology, but I started my career in trade publishing and worked in that for a number of years. I've worked in educational publishing as well for 5 years, and I'm a self-published author. And I have 5, 6 books that I've self-published, including the latest one is self-published. I've also edited many other books as a publisher or on contract. So I've gone deep into editing, also, of course, many articles. So I do feel like I understand a lot of the pain points. When with sessions like AI, anything touching words, it's really important these days to start off with a kind of review of the threats and concerns that people are feeling, because it really it clouds their thinking about what the possibilities are, because they're legitimately concerned about the many threats and issues that have arisen around AI, particularly within the publishing industry. I show a chart like this just to not drill down on all the specifics, but to acknowledge and remind people that there are a lot of different concerns, a lot of different things perceived as threats, a lot of things that have people very worried and less than enthusiastic, let's say, about what's going on with AI and in and around publishing and elsewhere. And you see things like this was published over the last 24 hours, 11,000 creatives condemning the unauthorized use of content for AI development. So there are some very, very tough issues that we have to acknowledge we're working within this context. I'm trying to show, the opportunity here, but very much mindful that there are some real problems. I also keep in mind too that there's very positive developments outside of some of the work that's being done editorially and for writing and creativity. When you look at the work, for example, in the medical field, and some tremendously powerful, positive things going on there, and I feel concerned that there's a possibility of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Now, the other thing is that people are again legitimately concerned about seeing their work brought into the AI data sets, because unquestionably some copyright work is in there, including some copyright books. And I do point out to authors and everyone working with these tools that there are ways to prevent your data being ingested. And what I'm showing there on the left-hand side of the screen is just a little button in ChatGPT where you can, they call it euphemistically improve the model for everyone. In other words, we're going to slurp up your content. You can turn that off. And there's an article in Wired that shows how to do that similar kind of task with all of the other software, because there's Facebook does it, LinkedIn does it, everybody does it, but you can prevent that. And so I recommend, as a first step, to turn off those buttons if those things are of any concern to you. You can abstain. That's what I also point out to authors. Just say no, and that's a perfectly legitimate approach. But if you're saying yes, let's look at what the possibilities are around grammar checking and what developments we've seen. The focus here today is book editing per se. And we talked about this, the three of us, before putting on the session today, and to what extent is all editorial common with other kinds of editorial? To what extent is book editing specific? Well, obviously there's a lot of very specific things about book editing, and so for those of you in attendance who are editors and don't work with books, I hope you'll find applicability here. But our focus really is on the book editing task today. When you try and look at book editing and then try and break it down, it was fun because I thought I'll try and see what the consensus is around this. And what are the 3 types of book editing, 4 types of book, 5? There's a general consensus around 4 or 5 types of book editing. Most will start off with developmental editing, substantive editing, then line editing is sometimes thrown in with copy editing, sometimes separate, and proofreading as a final quality control stage. but you see other people pointing to the 10 kinds of editing, which includes some interesting ideas that you don't think of necessarily. Self-editing is a separate task, fact-checking, which a lot of publishers do not do, and sensitivity reading has become an important part of the editorial process. So what is traditionally seen as book editing, I think, has expanded. And it's interesting that this expansion is taking place at the same time that technology is enabling some of these processes to be more efficient. And there's more, there'd be some controversy as to what exactly, should be brought into this framework, specialized editing, medical and legal, which brings us into the task, the wonderful SMEs. I've always enjoyed SMEs, the subject matter experts that are called upon. Plagiarism checks, translation editors, mechanical editing, indexing. Should that be seen as an editorial function? It's a standalone function, but it crosses over into editorial. Metadata analysis I see as an editorial related task. And again, there's academic editing and so much more, not all of which we're going to be able to relate to today. So when you think about any technology, I often like to bring this up because what is the goal? We have to contextualize what is it that we're trying to achieve here. Are we trying to do things faster? Are we trying to do them cheaper? Are we trying to do them better? And I think, when we're looking at AI and editorial, it's not about faster and cheaper, although those could potentially be achieved. It's about better. I mean, the goal has to be to use these tools to get a better outcome from the task. Let me start in on the tool set. And, as I was reviewing this, I was reminded as I went through some of my files, there's a lot of stuff, Word as a editorial tool, has been with us for a great long time, decades. And so pre-technology, but even specifically pre-AI, there are a number of things became available that are very useful to the grammatical challenge. So I put a couple up there on the slides. Again, these slides will send out to all the registrants. So if you don't have time to jot some of this down, we will be sending this out to you. And I'm reminded here, I just see it pop in the chat. By all means, put your questions into the chat, and we'll be monitoring those. We'll be looking at about 20 minutes to the hour. We hope that we can start in on the Q&A because we're a little bit time constrained today. But by all means, start popping your questions in and we'll address as many of those as we can. Those which we can't address, we'll answer them and send you the answers after the fact. So all the questions will be looked at. So these are the sort of analog pre-existing grammar tools. There's another one called doc tools, which has some interesting macros. I'm throwing these out not necessarily as this one's the best, but to show that there's a range of tools that are available. And I was reminded when I was revisiting what Microsoft Word builds into the software, there's some pretty powerful stuff in there. And this is the sort of the old tool set. I don't think this part of it is particularly AI enabled. It's mostly rules based. I see, for example, that they've included an inclusiveness check into the grammar settings, which I hadn't seen until last night. And that's a powerful and important tool. I haven't seen how well it works, but it's certainly something I'm going to be testing. And then, I have this startup database that I've been collecting publishing related technology enabled startups. I've got 1,600 of them in the database. I sorted out the ones that are specifically for AI and editing. There were 19 of them on top of this pre-existing tools like Microsoft Word. That's the listing. You can access the listing through that URL. As I went through, I checked a number of them, and I don't know that any of these are amazing. The ones that are focused towards academic editing, I think, are more rigorous than the ones focused to a more general audience. One Jenny I saw there, I thought, yeah, it looks pretty good. Might be worth checking some of these to see if you think they have value to you. But that's sort of the full tool set on top of Grammarly and ChatGPT and other things we'll be talking about today. Then looking at the problem, I want to try, briefly visit what the grammar checking task is. And depending on the text that you see, there's all kinds of different potential error types, preposition, morphology, determiner, et cetera, with examples of it there. So, it's a reminder of the complexity and the breadth of the challenge that we're assigning this software to try and mitigate. And likewise, there's a lot of subtlety that goes into it. Here's an original I want to explain. I want to explain to you some interesting part from my experience, where you can do a very minimal grammar checks and grammar corrections, such as I want to explain to you parts of my experience, but there's a level of fluency which goes beyond where you have to start shifting words. And likewise, when you look at what's available in tools like ChatGPT versus Grammarly, what you see here in this instance, which is again an interesting one in this, for an example, if exercising is helpful for family potential disease, we can always look for more chances for the family to go exercise. Well, that's fixable with simply the addition of a family. It doesn't have to be, a fancy fix, but you throw it into ChatGPT and ask it to take on the grammar challenge. It, of course, feels free to do a rewrite. And that's the rewrite that came up in this particular test, where ChatGPT shows a degree of fluency that may be one of its most interesting aspects in what it brings to the challenge. On the one hand, it's less formal and rigorous. On the other hand, perhaps its conversancy with language is one of its strengths in this particular challenge. And now another example, with this one was sort of fun. I was trying to find a test sentence that I could use as an illustration. So I asked Claude, one of ChatGPT's competitors, I'm coughing a bit today, excuse me. And so I asked Claude to come up with a tricky sentence that I could use as a test sentence. And they came up with this one: either you must complete the project by Friday, attending the client meeting, or taking responsibility for the delay. And the tricky part is attending the client meeting. Is it, is that part of the project? Is that after the project is completed, do you attend the client meeting? What's actually meant in that sentence? Well, I threw it into Grammarly, and Grammarly in the free version did just a very basic edit to that. You must complete the project by Friday, attend the client meeting, or take responsibility for the delay. And I still feel like, if well, let's look at it, how ChatGPT took it. It took the same, more or less the same approach as Grammarly, saying either you must complete the project by Friday, attend the client meeting, or take responsibility for the delay. Well, I followed up with ChatGPT and said, shouldn't it read and attend the client meeting? Because I think it's an and that's appropriate here. ChatGPT, in its banal, friendly way, you're right. If the intent is that both the project completion and attending the client meeting are required, the sentence should read either you must complete the project by Friday and attend the client meeting, or take responsibility for the delay. And so you see, just in that one example, the nuance of grammar can be lost on these tools easily. Claude, when I threw the sentence back at it to ask it to fix the grammar, came back with either you must complete the project by Friday or accept responsibility. It just dropped the meeting. It's like I can't figure out what to do with the meeting, so I'll just leave that out of the sentence. Not quite a good approach. Now, in preparing for this webinar, I did a review of a lot of the current studies that are starting to drill down on just how good the LLMs are in terms of being able to tackle the grammar task. This one's an interesting one. I put the URL on the slide. Can AI writing be salvaged? Mitigating idiosyncrasies and improving human AI alignment in the writing process through edits. A typically verbose title for a scholarly paper. Amongst the many interesting things in the paper is the conclusion. They went through a number of test edits and then trying to get human editors, trying to get ChatGPT, LLM-based editing as a separate function, and then put the final results in a sort of blind taste test to about 20 MFAs, as I recall. And what comes up, of course, is unsurprisingly the work edited by human editors is by far preferred. Perhaps I mean that's the good news. On the other hand, this second one, which is the LLM edited Oracle, what's not defined as is that the grammar. This was an automated grammar check through a large language model, and nearly a quarter of the respondents preferred that. So it's significant success within that experiment. The pure LLM generated original, of course, well, 10% got fooled into liking that, but that was not the winner on this one. So good news, writer, human editors still preferred. A lot of progress being made with these tools. And with that, I can turn things back to Peter and to Aaron. I'll stop sharing for now.
Thanks, Thad. Yeah, so the world of AI assistance and editorial workflows is clearly evolving really rapidly. So we want to be able to talk about both what's here and now available, as well as what may be coming down the pike. And I think part of the work that we need to be undertaking and in terms of our consideration is, how much of these technologies are going to be increasingly implicit in the tools that we're utilizing. So some of the foibles of current AI models that you've mentioned, like leaving out wholesale parts of text, how many of those elements are just going to go away? AI models are continuing to improve. So our ability to utilize large language models to be able to create predictive patterns in texts that are reliable, as well as integral to the texts that are being represented, is surely not going to decrease in capability. So how do we work with those capabilities moving forward? And I think also lurking over the horizon, and I hope we can get to this at the end of the session perhaps, is a question of agency. One of the things that the technology companies behind language models are trying to develop is an increasing ability to give instruction to language models that are beyond immediate or task-based, but more sort of work or session-based instructions. So instead of help me edit this paragraph, it will be more along the lines of I've received a new manuscript, please help me review it, check other texts for comparable patterns and structures and fit, and advise me both on the grammar of the text, but also give some assistance to our marketing group down the road if we decide to approve this. So I think we can look to a future where AI capabilities are increasingly integrated with the kinds of workflows that publishers have. And they're not just compartmentalized. They're not just help me rewrite this, but rather help me work through this manuscript in the context of all the other work that not only I am doing as an editor, but also what my firm is doing, what my publishing company is doing. And so, I think that the future of AI tools in this environment is going to be larger, and we have to start with what's available today, but keep an eye out for what's coming down the path. So I'd like to invoke Aaron here to help us think through what is available now, but keeping a mind out for what is coming. How are these tools evolving? How should we be considering the capabilities that they have now, and how they might be invoked in the future? Aaron.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and thanks everyone for having me here today. I am Erin Survey. I'm an editor and an instructor. In August of last year, I launched my AI for Editors course, and since then, I've taught it to more than 350 students from over 20 countries, and I have since launched customized training for in-house editorial teams based on this curriculum. So I've been spending a lot of time looking at how we can use AI tools within the editorial workflows to help us, yes, edit faster and also better. And I will show you today 3 ways that we can do this, and maybe it'll spark some ideas for you as well. I'll go over how to do copy editing with a tool called Edit GPT, setting analysis with a custom GPT, and as long as there's still time, I will show you how to make a macro with ChatGPT. The first tool I'll talk about is Edit GPT. Edit GPT is a copy editing tool. It uses generative AI, but its focus is on editing content that is already written versus writing something new from scratch, in quotation marks. It's easy to use. You don't have to understand anything about AI to use it and get good results. Essentially, what it's doing on the back end is it's running prompts that do editing, the same kind of prompts that you would put into a tool like ChatGPT or Claude or another to revise your text. But it's turned these prompts into these really simple looking buttons. So all you have to do is press a button and it changes the text in front of your eyes. It comes with many pre-built options like do a heavy copy edit or a light copy edit, change the formatting to align with Chicago style or APA. You can also create endless prompt buttons of your own to do anything that you want just about. For example, you could create a button that would put the text into middle school reading level. Or you could even create one that does something like rewrite the text to read in the voice of a vampire. Yes, I tried this. It was hilarious. I encourage you to try this as well. When you're done, you can export the file directly to Microsoft Word as a .docx file, and it will show the tracked changes, because I know that that is a big concern for a lot of people, wanting to make sure that they can show the writer what the program did. I have an example for us. We're going to look at this text. I've added some errors that I've underlined in red here. It says, Apple's name was no coincidence, for she was the caretaker of the most enchanting apple orchard. The apple orchard was her world. Each apple felt like a piece of Apple herself, and every visitor to Apple's apple orchard could feel Apple's presence in the very essence of the place. That being said, Apple could be found currently in rather deep contemplation about expanding her apple-focused agrarian empire to include pears, pumpkins, and potatoes. I have pumpkins underlined as an error because let's pretend that we are following Chicago style, and we will need to have that serial comma after that. Here's how it looks in Edit GPT. Editing that. First, I clicked the Chicago button and it's added that serial comma and corrected spelling errors. I can click accept all to accept all of the changes there. I can click this concise button to make it less wordy. And I can accept or reject individual changes by clicking on the edit and clicking accept or reject. Rather straightforward, user-friendly. I can also select just one piece to edit. So I selected that final sentence, clicked simplify, And now we have a much easier to read final sentence there. In how long was that? A minute, maybe? We were able to work through that text to put it in Chicago style, correct all the errors, and make it more readable. And here's the final result. It got all of the spelling errors and the style error. And it made that last sentence a lot nicer to look at. Apple is no longer currently in rather deep contemplation about expanding her Apple-focused agrarian empire. Instead, now she's thinking hard about expanding her Apple farm. Quick and easy copy editing in Edit GPT. The second example is showing you what you can do for different types of analysis of fiction writing by creating a custom GPT. We're going to specifically be looking at how to analyze the setting of a scene with a custom GPT that I built, that I've named Add More Trees. A custom GPT is a small version of ChatGPT that you can create by yourself to have a specific tailored use. There are really nearly endless use cases for this particular solution across the editorial workflow. There are many different kinds of custom GPTs that you could build. Whatever you can think of. If you can dream it, you can be it, whatever that quote is, you know what I'm talking about. For instance, the custom GPT that I'm going to show you is the one that I created, as I said, to analyze a scene's setting and sensory details. I created it, and I am not a coder by any means. I was able to build this because you don't need to know traditional coding. Instead, you code by writing simple instructions in sentence format using plain English. No 001s involved, at least from what we can see. Here are the guts of the custom GPT I built, Add More Trees. This is what it looks like on the inside. And you can see in this instructions box right here how little there actually is there in the instructions box. This is the code I wrote. It's 5 lines, 2 sentences. That's it. And it's in plain English. When I teach people how to build custom GPTs, I teach them to include more details than you see on the screen, but I wanted to illustrate how powerful the results are that you can get with very simple, short, straightforward instructions. It doesn't take a lot of skill to get a very usable tool. So now let's take a look at Add More Trees GPT in action as it analyzes that text we saw previously about Apple and her orchard. All I did was paste in that paragraph, and it's started an assessment of the setting. I'm going to show you close-ups in a sec, but I wanted you to get a feel for how fast this is going and how much it is writing when I only gave it 3 sentences to work with. 3 sentences meaning the information about apple in her orchard. There we go. It's written, even you can see at first glance, a rather comprehensive review of setting on the 3 sentences I gave it. Let's look at some close-ups. These are screenshots from what you just saw. It starts with an overall assessment. And I've underlined here the parts that I liked best. And I liked how it said, the idea that each apple feels like a piece of her helps to create a mystical and enchanting atmosphere. However, the setting remains abstract and vague. The reader isn't yet able to visualize the orchard or fully immerse themselves in its magic. Fair point. It then gives us more information about the setting's alignment with plot, theme, and characters. And it gives us 3 specific suggestions for improvement, starting with add sensory details such as the way the light filters through the branches. 2, personalize the orchard. How is Apple's orchard different from any other? It suggests maybe the trees might have unusual growth patterns. And in the sample revision that it's given us, it says the trees twisted and spiraled in strange, beautiful ways, which I thought was rather lovely, interesting, kind of beautiful writing. And the 3rd suggestion was my favorite. Connect the setting to Apple's character arc. If the orchard is a reflection of Apple's character or her emotional state, show how changes in the orchard mirror changes in her. The sample revision, as Apple walked through her orchard, she couldn't help but notice how the leaves had begun to dull, their vibrant green now edged with brown. The apples, too, seemed smaller this season, their once lustrous skins now speckled with imperfections. Apple's heart ached with the thought that the orchard was mirroring her own weariness, as though the land itself was tied to her fading energy. I can tell you that that's better than what I could come up with in the 30 seconds that it took it to write all of that. And if that would indeed be Apple's character arc, the writer may want to take this as it is or lightly revise it or make it more heavily revised so we don't get into any copyright issues, but they could perhaps take the idea. There's a lot there, and I want you to know that I spent most of my career as a fiction editor. These are all suggestions that I have made to authors, not about Apple's apple orchard, because I made that up, but about different stories. There's no way that I could write that in 30 seconds. No way. If I were editing a fiction manuscript, I could pop a scene with anemic setting into this GPT that I built, read over the suggestions, and then pick and choose using my own human editorial judgment which ideas would be best for that story, for that author, and for that story's readers. So that's how I would work with the AI tool to give some suggestions, a result that would be faster and possibly better than what I would have done before. And many times I've done experiments like this, and the AI comes up with ideas that are quite brilliant that I don't think I would have ever come up with. those are two of the three examples that I had for you. And I'm wondering, do we want me to quickly go through macro creation, or would you like me to save it? I do have a URL, aiforeditors.com/BISG, where I can put a recording of the macro piece if we want to save that and put the rest of the time toward the questions. So what would we like me to do?
Erin, I think several questions are coming through in looking at the tools and support that you've brought to the fore here. How is the editorial task going to evolve? I think you know, if you're doing work in graphic illustration or arts, you're already working with tools that are being embedded in the creative tool suite that you're working with. I think you've articulated a vision here where increasingly AI affordances are being integrated into, you know, not just Word for the author, but also the toolkits that editors might be utilizing. How is, in your opinion, how is that editorial role going to evolve when we're looking at a near future when both authors and editors have this kind of revision, this kind of enhancement capability at their proverbial fingertips? Where do our job assignments shift? And to some extent, where do we kind of uplift ourselves, if you will, in terms of what we're capable of, you know, the kinds of tasks that we would anticipate authors taking on as part of their role, what kind of tasks that editors should be assuming that they will take on as part of their role.
Peter, just to jump in here and not to cut you off, Erin, but we're seeing in the chat that a lot of folks are very interested in seeing your macros. Can we very quickly take a look at that just to allow folks to see that preview there? We're getting lots of great feedback here.
That's true.
I will be happy to answer that question after I show you about the macros. I'm glad that we have macros fans in the audience. I can share that it took me a long time to work up the courage to try macros because I was convinced that they were going to be way too difficult for me. And I have actually cried when trying to get a macro that other people have built to work on my own machine. And that's why making macros with ChatGPT is so magical and fantastic. Here's a quick overview. What is a Word macro? This is a little program that runs inside Microsoft Word that automates repetitive tasks. So think of what copy editors do over and over as they're editing a document, like formatting changes, putting headings in title case, setting alt text to Times New Roman, or changing every time the author uses bold for emphasis. I know some of you out there feel me on that. Or corrections like inserting the serial comma, moving a comma inside quotation marks. Macros can make these changes across an entire document with the click of a button. They are efficiency powerhouses. Most editors that I know use macros that are pre-built, that someone else created, that they tracked down on the internet somewhere. And that's okay for standard macros that you could use for any document. But there are many times when there could be a super specific macro that you may only use for one project ever, but it would save you so much time with that one project. A situation where you wouldn't find something that's pre-built. So you can make macros with ChatGPT. And here's how. Step 1, tell ChatGPT to make a macro that does X, whatever action you want it to take. Step 2, add the macro to Microsoft Word. Step 3, I'm kidding. There is no step 3. That's it. There's just those 2 steps. It's really that easy. So let's look at this apple orchard text again, and let's pretend that I'm copy editing this. I may worry that I may miss some lowercase apples that are supposed to be uppercase and vice versa. I could write a prompt as simple as this. Please write a macro for Microsoft Word VBA, Visual Basic for Applications, that highlights capital A apple in green and lowercase a apple in red. This is what that looks like. This is inside ChatGPT. What you see in the black box is ChatGPT writing the macro code to do that process. It's done. Yep, this is not on fast forward. It's really that fast. I copy the code, hop over to Microsoft Word. I paste in the macro code. I select that macro from the macro list. I hit run. And there we have it. Apple, capital A, green, apple, lowercase a, red. That fast. That whole process to have ChatGPT write the macro, to have me install the macro, and run the macro took 47 seconds. Yeah. It will help me as an editor to be more accurate and to do higher quality work more efficiently using a custom solution that I couldn't find anywhere else. And it can make that custom solution so fast. Yes, I know that that's a bit overwhelming to see how quickly all that can work. I'd be happy to talk to you more about how to build macros with ChatGPT and other topics. Here's where you can find me. I train teams at publishers and editorial agencies on AI editing. You can enroll your editors in my public course to learn safe and ethical ways to boost efficiency. And you can get an extended version of today's demo at aiforeditors.com/BISG. And I would now be happy to answer that question about what are editors' jobs going to look like? Well, I can give you my best guess because I'm not a mind reader. It'd be wonderful if I were. Based on everything that I have experienced and seen with students and just watching the developments, I'm anticipating editors' roles morphing to look more like running text through programs that do the work rather than doing a lot of that manual editing themselves. They don't need to move the commas around in the document themselves. They don't need to spend 10 minutes trying to unwind a paragraph long, overly complicated, multi-semicolon single sentence to figure out how to edit it. They can get help with one of these tools to do that. And that's where I think it's going, is being the person who is running text through these programs and checking the output, being the human involved as the quality control in that process. And I know that there were more questions in that question, but you'll have to remind me what they were.
Well, we definitely have a few more questions in the Q&A that I'd love to get to for folks, if we can pivot a little bit and answer some of those for the sake of time. Someone has asked, sometimes I see that LLMs, while rewriting text, omit content. This is problematic when editing. Is there any way to do a check automatically to make sure all of that content is still there?
I think I would have to know more about that specific situation to know how it is omitting content before I could answer that. So please feel free to email me and give me some more specifics, and I'll get back to you.
Another question asks, does Edit GPT work in languages other than English?
I am only fluent in English, but I do know the person who built this tool, and he built it in part to help people who are, especially academics, who are not native English speakers, so they can write their research in their native tongue and then be able to get that translated into English. So based on that, I will say yes.
Lots of folks have also had questions about tools for working with bibliographies and citations. Where can we use AI, if we can use AI reliably, for working with those very technical sections of editorial?
I teach people how to do this simply through ChatGPT. You could use Claude, you could use Perplexity. I know that there are some other very tailored tools for this, but you can use it in these sort of Swiss Army knife AI tools as well. You can also get it to track down missing information, especially if you use Perplexity, which is an AI search engine, but it can do much more than that. It can reach out and find missing elements, like the missing author name or the missing journal name, and fill that information in for you and put it in the format that you want it to be in. It's about prompting it in the right way to get it to do that action.
Does that
Maybe.
apply to different styles, like Chicago versus
Mhm.
MLA versus?
Absolutely. It can do it can put citations, references, etc. in all of those styles that you mentioned. One caveat that I've noticed is that it hasn't quite caught up with the changes to the most recent edition of the Chicago Manual of Style, which came out last month. You still have to be the human responsible for the output, and that might involve, in that situation, making sure that you delete the publication city name, which I know is one of the updates with reference lists. But for the most part, it can certainly save time, even if you have to go back through and all you have to do is delete the city names.
On that question, Brooke, in terms of specialized tools for bibliography, citations, and also indexing tools, I'm going to add those listing with links to my slides. So I will give you some lists of specialized tools. There's a bunch of them. I'll add those to the slides that we send out to you.
Thank you, Thad. And I think we have time for one more question, so we'll wrap up the questions in the Q&A. Any questions that we don't get to before we have to wrap up today, we will curate together and we'll have the panelists respond to those and send that out when we distribute the slides and the recording. So last question. These products have to ingest potentially confidential info, at least potentially confidentially, before there's a version ready for public review. Any concerns about inputting manuscripts without having an enterprise agreement that provides a sandbox or ensures confidentiality by contract?
Those tools I showed in my presentation, switching off ChatGPT, ingestion, and plus the tools that are mentioned in that Wired article, as far as I know, that keeps it in your sandbox. I think you're secure. The enterprise versions do have custom tools for that. Peter, do you understand that to be other than the case?
Yeah, sorry, unmuting. Yeah, I think it depends how the model is invoked. Certainly throwing manuscripts into interfaces enables that content to be available for post post initial training refinement of the models. So we're really talking about different stages and how the technologies are working with materials in order to refine their outputs. So I guess the question most pertinent is, does this kind of activity assist the models in engaging in copyright infringement or producing output that is replica of what I've provided? And the short answer is no. There's a although there's a big asterisk on that, but there are multiple steps between submitting a document to an AI interface and asking for improvement, and then the long run output of or the capability of generating output from the AI model that is like that input. That's a risk of the initial ingest more than you're working with the AI on an ongoing basis.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. We are wrapping things up. So again, there are unanswered questions in the chat and the Q&A. We will get to those and send them out when we distribute the recording and the slides. Just a quick thank you to our presenting co-sponsors for helping us get the word out and support the important work that we do in trying to make this information available to everyone. And thank you to Thad, and thank you to our speakers, Aaron and Peter, so much for participating today.
Thank you, Brooke.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.